I want to thank everyone for coming out today for our diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting. Today, we're going to have an agenda that's somewhat brief, but we're going to get into it. We're going to hand the floor over to our Assistant Superintendent for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Natasha Freeman-Mack.
Good evening. As we look at item 1.1. We'll talk about equity across the district. Let me speak up, you said. Yeah, I'm good. So in looking at equity across the district and thinking about that definition of equity that we defined some time back within this committee, there has to be a focus on learning. As we examine equity, there is a difference between equality and equity. And if you look at this example in this picture, which I'm sure many people have seen over the years, equity isn't about just making things equal, but it's making them equitable so that all can enjoy and see. So when we focus on learning in the classrooms, we need to examine what equity looks like in our classrooms. So we seek to understand how teachers hold students to higher expectations. Also, how teachers strategize, how teachers create strategies for students, how they're examining strategies and skills in the classroom as it relates to each content level and content area. And also, how teachers examine higher order thinking across the content areas. How are students thinking? How are we increasing their level of thinking and their understanding? And that's a building-wide approach as well, as we're examining our classroom libraries to examine equity within them, as we're also looking at the decor in the classroom, the curriculum, connecting with parents, examining our supplies, and even speakers we bring into our buildings. In terms of our systems, how HR handles equity within its hiring practices, how we're examining our curriculum and instruction and all of our resources. And then again, also how we're looking at our disproportionality and our systems in place as it relates to code of conduct and character. You may go to the next slide, please. So that view for the purpose of looking at equity across the district, it's going to come in 3 places. Looking at equity through a programmatic lens, through the resource of equity that is aligned to our superintendent's strategic plan, and also achievement in equity. Examining how our students are getting the services that they need. Examining our resources for each building and not just tailoring out to a one-size-fits-all. You may go to the next slide, please. And as we look at equity, these are the factors as we're examining it that should not hold students back. Race, culture, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, immigration status, individual experiences, and social and economic status. So we also have to examine, looking at our classroom settings, how many students are taking our advanced AP courses, our honors courses, looking at that breakdown through gender as well as ethnicity, and seeing how we can enhance and create more opportunities that speak to students in all of these areas, as well as ability and disability as well. And so equity has to be evident from each building within our district. It's a hand approach. We want to examine what we need to do and hit things with the bullseye so that we can graduate not just on academy field, but beyond that as well. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Madam President, any questions, comments? Dr. Mack, I have a question. So when we talk about equity and equality, there's a third line I like to put there. And can you tell me how that looks in our district and where we are in regards to this? So I like to say equity versus equality versus our reality. Where are we at? And are we comfortable where we fit in that conversation? And what do you, if not, if so, great, but if not, what do you think is going to take for us to get to a reality definition of equity?
So if we go back to slide 2, those are those areas we're talking about. We have to focus on our learning. We have to look at what we're doing in our classrooms, our buildings, and our systems, because we do have some areas where we're not so equitable. So what are we doing in those areas? What are we creating as it lends itself to classroom resources? You know, are students able to see themselves in the books that they are reading? Are they challenging themselves? Are those books challenging enough? Are our boys and our girls feeling like they're involved? Are they just reading stories about girls only? Are they reading stories about boys too? So all of those things are important. So I think it's an ongoing process. I don't think that we can jump up and say, we're equitable, we're equitable. I think it's just going to be an ongoing process, and that's a good thing because there's always areas for improvement.
One more question to follow up. So in our district, what would you consider the low hanging fruit? And what would you consider something that's going to take a deeper dive in regards to equity in our district?
I'm unclear.
Things that we can change. So when I say low hanging, things that we can change quickly to really show that we're going in the direction that equity is important, that it's something that we treasure, something that we value, and things that you think are going to take a deeper dive on digging into a systemic part of what we do.
I think one of the things that we changed quickly was the focus and the view for this committee.
Okay.
I think the way it's encompassing now, and we're looking at the different divisions and we're examining, well, where are we and where do we need to go next? I think that's a great place for us to be. And I think that shift is a great pivot for us, and it will allow us to explore more of what we still need.
Great answer. Madam President?
In reading this, in this agenda, I'm really happy to introduce Mr. McLemore and Mrs. Van, who are now going to talk about growing our own from human resources.
Thank you, Madam President and Mr. Chair. So as we look at equity in HR, we began to examine as a district where we are. We look at our current status, look at our current demographics, and then we began to actually focus on where are those gaps and what are those gaps that need to be closed. And so before we get into this particular slide here, you need to know that across the United States, everybody's scrambling. At the last career fair that we attended, we discovered that there was a recruiter or two recruiters from the state of Nevada, where they had 3,000 openings. And so everyone is trying to find multiple avenues, multiple entry points to deal with the gaps and the shortages. So one of the things that we are beginning to focus on are those beautiful gems that we have in our district already who are teaching assistants. We have a lot of teaching assistants who have degrees that are very interested in ascending to a teaching career. With that being said, it is a perfect opportunity and a segue for us to now use that as an entry point into helping us filling the gaps that we have in our district. Some of the teaching assistants have bachelor's degrees or even master's degrees. And so what we want to do is we want to take a look at those personnel and to see how we can help them and assist them in helping us fill our gap. So we're looking at multiple avenues. And another one of the things that we are trying to do is how can we support them? They're already here with us. They spent a number of years as an employee in the district. They have attained a certain degree of education, and they have already proven themselves as an employee. So now how can we support them to the next level in helping us fill the gaps that we need? Next slide, please. And so this particular slide really gives you an idea of what it costs for an average master's degree at a SUNY college or university. And you'll see there's a figure, $17,989. And that's for the credit hours alone. That doesn't include the other administrative fees that might go along with it. Doesn't include the books and, things of that nature. So, and then you'll see the teaching assistant salaries, which is a negotiated item. That's a negotiated item. But if you take the salary, even the highest step, and subtract what it costs for the actual degree itself, you'll see that is really like poverty level. You can't imagine a teaching assistant taking half of their salary that they need to survive and then putting it into education. They have to make a choice. So this would be a good opportunity to see where we could support them and help them to help us fill the gap. Next slide, please. So in growing our own, first of all, it's a great opportunity. So what you'll see that there were a number of teaching assistants already that have self-identified themselves as having their degree or obtaining their degree, whether it be the bachelor's level or the master's level. And so there's approximately 36 of them that hold bachelor's degrees in various areas. And that includes teaching, the teaching and the curriculum development. And then there's another 11. There's 11 that hold master's degrees in education, but those are not in our shortage areas. So they might hold the degree, but it's not in our shortage areas. And those of us that know about what it takes to obtain a teaching degree, that you have to have those education courses first. And then depending on what field that you're going in, then that's the path that you take. So there are some requirements, but nearly half of all of the TAs that we surveyed expressed interest. So that's a good sign. That's a good sign. We have them, they have their degrees, and they have expressed interest and are committed to staying with us for a number of years, even after getting their degree. So you'll see that, glasses on. You get older, the eyes get bad. So what we want to do is we want to support them, as I previously stated, by piloting, tuition support for those that are interested, for a total of a number of 5 in a graduate education program. And so this is going to be another segue of helping us fill our shortage area. And you'll see the shortage areas down there at the bottom: secondary science, secondary math, foreign language. That includes a gamut. Next slide, please. And so this gives you another idea, gives you a picture, if you will, of the pathway to the degree. So you'll see at the college level, you'll see the per credit rate, and then the cost for 38 credits, which it will be. That's a total of 17,898. And then you multiply that times the 5 that we would support, it will be a total of $89,490. I think we have one more slide. Yes. So as we look a little further, you'll see that this gives even a better picture of the landscape of our district. You can see the number of people by the demographics, by the unit or bargaining unit, NASA, CSEA, confidential, senior staff, NTA, and the teaching assistants included in there as well. And so this gives you a picture of who we are right now. And if we desire to change that picture to what we want it to be, then we would, of course, move in the path that would help us change that picture.
And if I may,
Go ahead.
to add to the presentation, some of the trends that we've identified are that, as we've seen historically, CSEA continues to lead the diversity, the distribution of employees, both gender-wise and by ethnicity. That's followed by the NASA unit and then the small group of senior staff members. In contrast, the least diversity continues to manifest itself within the NTA bargaining unit, although when you drill deeper into the data, you'll come to realize that guidance counselors, social workers, and psychologists are highly diverse, both by gender and race. Confidential managerial personnel, particularly in our finance department, also show little diversity by both race and gender. So as HR continues to recruit new personnel, we continue to use a diversity lens, particularly at our local job fairs, as well as our own innovations. However, we still struggle. That's the reality. We're struggling just like most other districts. And so we are very open to any other ideas that anyone may have.
Thank you, Madam President and Mr. Chair.
This was a really good kickoff for this discussion. I think you gave us a lot to think about. And I think the $89,000 or whatever it is truly worth it. My suggestion would be those people that are going through that group need a mentor. They need somebody that's going to listen to their problems around exam time, around getting their stuff together for coursework, to help them be successful without being overwhelmed. The two of you understand that because you're working on your doctorates and you are both working together and you have each other to lean on. Those 5 are going to need somebody. They're going to need a mentor to really help them. The last thing I want to say, and I'm going to ask Mr. Howard if he has any questions, is this last chart is very telling. And the reason that it's telling is because I remember a chart just like this in 1980 when I started on the diversity committee that was put up, and it's very similar. As sad as that sounds, it's very similar. So I think we have work to do, and I think you guys are starting to do it, and it's going to take a concerted effort. Thank you. Mr. Howard, do you have a question?
No, I don't have any questions. Like I said, I appreciate the report.
Can I just say thanks? Is it okay?
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm glad that Sarah brought up the fact that the numbers are a bit skewed. around the helping profession. When I talk to the people we hire, the guidance counselors, school psychologists, and social workers, the reason they're in that field is because somebody of color guided them when they were young. And that's why they landed in the position they're in. So that's part of the interview questions when we get to. So it goes to show that challenge that we have is that when we have folks of color in front of our kids, they oftentimes provide the role models that may translate into an adult profession like teaching. When they don't have someone across from them that looks like them, you perpetuate the generational problem that, you know, is a black man going to go into teaching profession if they don't have other mentors and, you know, to have shown them the way. So I always found that very, very profound when we talk to the social workers, guidance counselors, and social workers about, you know, they got there because someone guided them who understood their journey and they wanted to give back as a result. So just something in this challenge we need to think about.
I don't want to jump the gun, but in the next section, which Mr. Howard is going to introduce, I mean, there's a lot of really good data. Mr. Howard, would you like to introduce the next section?
Our next item on the agenda will be equitable access for all. Curriculum instruction. I'm going to hand the floor over to Dr. Farrell and Mrs. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Equitable access for all is something that we work very hard every day to assure within our core content areas at all grade levels. But in addition to that, we have attempted to provide the opportunities for accelerated learning for all of our students also. We offer advanced placement courses at 3 of our NFA campuses, and the district absorbs the exam fees for culminating assessments for these courses. That gives our students the opportunity to be successful and earn potential college credit, depending on their success in the exams as they go forward in their careers. We also have college credit courses available from Syracuse, Mercy, Orange County Community College, and access to both advanced placement and college credit courses is available to every student enrolled in our district. Some of the courses may have prereqs for college work, but most do not. We also have our P-TECH program through Dutchess Community College and our Marist College program. These are opportunities for students to earn a 2-year degree as well as certifications within particular business fields, which provide them with work experience and mentors in their own field of interest. When they finish those 2 programs, they not only have college credit to continue their educations and or begin entry-level work in a career field of their choice with a well-paying position. Also, grade 8. Our grade 8 campuses have offered accelerated courses of a huge variety across our campus. And what we have sought to do is harmonize them so there is equitable access for all 4 of our 8th grade programs for all of our scholars. They can take Algebra 1, Living Environment, or Earth Science available for grade 8 study. This accelerates their opportunities in high school and it enables them to sit for a Regents exam if they so choose. On the next slide, we know that we need to work to provide data based on our gender and ethnicity and enrollment in our courses. One things we were able to access in time for this presentation was our social studies AP enrollment data. And basically what we did was broke it down at North, Main, and West by gender and by courses that students had and by enrollment for the 3 campuses. By far, the largest enrollment, as would be expected, is at Main because the student body is larger. We are working to provide an AP course at West for September. Moriarty? No. Oh, me, I apologize, that's me. These are our CPE programs, career exploration. This September, we will be offering elective courses for grades 6, 7, and 8. These are exploratory courses for career interest in electronics, fashion and design, and culinary skills. This summer, in our summer school program, on Fridays, our grade 5 students will have exposure to a variety of CTE programs by visiting the main campus and seeing those programs in action. And our grade 6, 7, and 8 students will also participate at South in their summer school campus. all of our NFA students have access to those programs for certifications and to stimulate interest in career goals. On the next two slides, we have broken down the variety of programs we currently are able to offer by enrollment, by ethnicity, and by gender. Programs are open to all students of all backgrounds and all genders. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, depending on one's perspective, there are some areas where the traditional breakdown of gender and interest is maintained. We work very hard to encourage our students to cross-gender and explore activities that may be stereotypically identified as being male and or female, to assure them that there are opportunities for both genders in all of the fields. We are also working to add to the array of courses we have. For example, we're developing a law enforcement program, hopefully for rollout in the spring of next year. Next slide, thank you.
You can go to the next one, please. Yeah. So as Dr. Freeman Mac and Dr. Farrell both indicated, we're really looking inside our classrooms to see what are the offerings inside our classroom. What are the academic intervention services, our AIS supports, look like for our students who are not on grade level yet or are struggling? So across the district, we offer both push in, where the teacher goes in to support students in a small group instruction, and pulls out. Additionally, at the secondary level, there are six period intervention options to support the students' schedule and support their needs at the secondary level. So equitable services, what are the needs that the students have? How are they identified, and what are we doing to address them? Similarly, for our English language learners, we have both a push in and pull out model, depending on proficiency level, depending on school. The students receive additional language supports to ensure their mastery of listening, reading, writing, and speaking to become proficient. Next slide, please. Our after-school programs. What are the needs of our students? What are their interests? What can we offer them? So across the district, K through 12, we have several different options. We have 62 extracurricular club activities, mostly at the 7 through 12 level. We have Empire program offerings that change throughout the course of the year, also based on student interest and teacher interest on what they would like to teach. Those are offered 4 times a week, and we have a robust summer program. 21st century programs in 4 of our elementary schools. That's not only just academic, but they also have other fun, quote unquote, activities to support their learning and their interests. We have high impact tutoring, after-school programs for students who are identified as needing a little more support in 5 elementary schools. Rock the Region Saturday Review, both in the fall and the spring semesters for our high school students. Saturday English for our L students, enrichment at the elementary. That's during the spring semester. Next slide, please. And we also have for our Ls at the secondary level, we have homework help after school 3 times a week. And we have a partnership with the Liberty Partnership and Orange County Community College for academic enrichment and other activities throughout the course of the year. We also have field trips because we know that students who bring real world experiences to the classroom can apply their knowledge and engage in learning and more robustly. So our field trips, we like to stimulate the interest that aligns to the unit or academic areas, science, social studies, ELA, math, all of them, to increase that classroom study.
Title IX, all of our varsity and JV sports support boys and girls teams. The funding and district support for all teams is similar, and it's equitable, designed to meet the specific needs of each activity. We have district-wide gender-neutral bathrooms as required. And currently, as you know, through our facilities presentations and construction presentations, locker room facilities at NFA and Maine are being repaired and remodeled to reflect gender neutral access also. Next slide, please. Fine and performing arts. We are currently working to ensure that all of our programs support the development of student talent and stimulate student interest in and appreciation of the arts. Our students need to have opportunities to both explore the arts as well as understand art, the history of all the various aspects of the performing arts. And we have opportunities that we vigorously seek to provide venues for our students to showcase their talents. We have incredibly talented students. Our students excel in theater, dance, performance, music, vocal and instrumental. And it's important that they have the opportunities to showcase those talents, not only in district performances, but in county and state competitions. As we move forward with the restructuring of that division of curriculum and instruction, we are looking very hard to expand equitable access to each and every spoke of the fine and performing arts wheel at all of our elementary schools and continue that growth through our middle and high schools. And that concludes our presentation.
Madam President, any questions?
I have a
Comments?
couple of questions.
Go for it.
So, thank you for a nice presentation. It was really nice. And the data, I really liked the career and technical education data. That was very interesting. I'd really like to have a more intense dive, even fine and performing arts. I'd like to see racial and gender breakdowns of most of our classes and especially, and some of our other APs. So that was really good as a beginning. But I think, it's something that now we have the data. What do we do?
Right.
And how do we use that data to improve what we need to improve? And that is the performance of all of our students. So that's number one. My second, and this is a general question, not for today, but this is a general one. How do we know that the programs work? How do we know that AIS works? How do we know that summer school and after school programs work? And who do they work for? So are they working for all of our students? Or are they working for just some of our students? And then if so, what do we need to change to make sure that it's equitable? Because, we have equality. So, because that's what we're talking about today. And the last thing is, and this is a little tongue in cheek, field trips. They need to be aligned, as you said, to the academic areas to increase academics. So I think that's really an important thing. But thank you for the beginnings of thinking here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. The one question I have, that really dovetailing off something Madam President just stated. I'm curious, what are the strategies that we use to try to encourage kids to participate in our CPE programs? What strategies are we using? Are we thinking outside the box? Are we trying to encourage kids at a younger age to have interest as they matriculate upwards into the school districts who want to be participating in this, giving them ideas of what these opportunities will avail for them after school?
I think one of the things we have not done as deep a dive into that work as we can. That's clear. I think one of the things we are looking at doing is encouraging students at an earlier age to understand that there are opportunities for career exploration, both within the college framework as well as in the world of work with certifications to job entry. And the two can often overlap. One of the areas we have discussed with Mr. Eitri, who is our director in that performance area, is bringing some of our students to some of the BOCES activities and college fairs that focus on career exploration to help them understand that there is opportunity within that field that might be of interest to them, as well as earning college credit at the same time. We need to work with our students at a younger age. We need to work with our parents to help them recognize that This is something of lasting value for their students as well, as for our district to provide those opportunities. But we need to do more.
Okay, thank you.
I-
Can I
I
just add
believe-
something to
Yes,
that?
Ms.
Thank you.
Moran.
So, as Dr. Farrell just indicated, we do need to do something at a younger age. So tipping the iceberg, we're hoping that this summer, the involvement at fifth grade, having a field trip every Friday to CTE or bringing it into the elementary program. Specifically, we're going to look at cosmetology, culinary, auto body, wood shop. Those will be some of them. And then also the expansion that we're looking to do in the middle school beginning in September. So that's just tipping the iceberg, but we're hoping that that will do exactly what you just stated and start to enhance some of these programs.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Madam President, back at you.
So I want Mr. Bear to be aware of the time because we will hold time and I will, cut you off. But in looking at this beforehand, this is very interesting stuff. So I'm going to introduce Mr. Bear, who's going to be talking about disproportionality.
Thank you, Ms. Mayo. So we had kind of introduced the fact that we are generationally disproportionate with regard to suspension. It's been going on for a long time. We have been close a few times from being off the list, but we continue to perpetuate and are on the list again after COVID. So just as a reminder, we're working with the Regional Partnership Center. They're a technical assistance partner in the State Education Department, and they have a group called their Targeted Skills Group, the TSC group. We've gone to them monthly. Dr. Freeman Mack has begun to be invited as well. We're doing a culminating activity on May 30th, actually at BOCES, where we'll get a chance to spotlight some of the work that we're doing at Newburgh. There was a root cause done by Dr. Roman at the time that continues to be the one that we use as our working root cause that really lets us better understand why we are disproportionate. And that guys are work. And then we have monthly goals, which we'll talk about in this presentation. So this is just sort of, I took the highlights of the root cause. It's a 3 or 4, maybe a 4-page document. So you can read for yourself, but this is what a committee of people back in 1920 identified. And in our opinion, these still hold true now, 4 years later, right? That educators lack awareness and experience of working with diverse groups of students. Demographics have shifted, especially with our Hispanic and L students. That has created a new dynamic in some of what's occurring in schools. This is still true today. Dr. Freeman Max looked at this year, and it's still true that insubordination, which has become, in our opinion, a very loaded term. It's poorly defined and overused, and but yet that's the state uses that term, but it doesn't necessarily. It's not broken down in a way to really understand the behavior behind insubordination. Sometimes we attribute behavior in that way that it had nothing to do. We always give the example of a young person who comes into a classroom wearing something on their head because maybe they're embarrassed by their hair. They didn't have enough to get their hair done. Teacher says, take your whatever you have in your head off. They refuse, and they're called insubordinate. And that completely lacks some of the cultural and demographic and maybe socioeconomic issues that might have caused that moment. And yet that's how it's coded. And then this is the big one. There's a lack of shared community norms, development of culture and climate. Common language around behavioral expectations is lacking. There's a need for community building and relationship development. Community circles offer a solution to establishing norms, values, and agreements. So it's very telling this was written 4 years ago. And what I'll talk about going forward is kind of how we begin to at least knock away at this particular progressing issue. Next slide. So again, the action planning goals, you can see that the work with Dr. Hunter that's in the plan is to have that be one of the goals for the year. Continue to look at the code of conduct. We look at it through the SAVE committee, but the group that goes to the monthly meetings also has the responsibility to look at the code of conduct, just to provide some additional insight to the RPC group. And then the part we're going to really highlight today is the full implementation of restorative practices, which includes the action plan. Every building has one, and they're in different states of development. So, and just to be clear, we're talking about our secondary schools. We have an informational campaign going on. You may see posters throughout our buildings. There's actually one right here on a post as you walk down, and you can notice it tonight, that really explains what restorative justice is, and what's embedded in them. And we're rolling them out on a monthly basis as part of a newsletter on our website. And then to begin to implement the circles as we begin to provide professional development and onboard folks. So this is just, I just took one example on the next page. I'm not going to go through it if you can click. This is kind of what you may see throughout the district. It kind of begins to break down for folks. So at least because one of the conversations we hear a lot is nobody knows what this is, right? So how do we begin to really make this an ongoing campaign? It started with this, and we've really moved forward to make it really activate this into at least weekly practice. Next slide. So, this is how we kind of see where the measures of progress will be. The question is always asked, how do we know this is having impact, right? We should see a decrease in referral and suspension rates. We want to see an increase in the use of the restorative justice practices, and we want to decrease recidivism. That's oftentimes talked about as an important marker in trying to get kids to not replicate the same behaviors over and over again. If we're teaching them skills, they shouldn't necessarily repeat the same offenses. And then, again, you'll see that self-report as to maybe having kids change their attitudes about school. So this next slide is, we've begun probably about 2 years ago, but more with Fidelity last year, is really keeping track of how often we provide these restorative practices. And what you can see, which is really important, you have almost a double the number of times you either do a community circle, a restorative circle, a reentry meeting, a mediation, conflict resolution. And what I'm going to say about this slide, it's a little it's an underestimate. The reason being that we had to identify a way to track these practices. We're using PLP, which is a communique in our Infinite Campus, to capture them. And some buildings haven't used them with the same fidelity, and we've worked on that. So, for example, in Infinity North, Rabbi Mohican is our primary conduit for restorative justice. She's only begun to track, but she's done many more than 65. Dr. Freeman Mack can certainly attest to that. But so I just want to, with a degree of, just not to this really is an underestimate. And the same would be true of South. One of our guidance counselors left the district who was very, very faithful, and I think that's an artificial decrease. So we hope next year very, very on point and capture every one of those opportunities that we provide to kids. Next slide. This is where one of the markers that I think gives us a positive, I'm going to say out loud, and BMO has been very transparent. Our suspensions have increased. We are worried about that. Post-COVID, we're seeing behaviors that aren't necessarily within the wheelhouse of restorative justices, things like vaping. Those are not really meant to be used. That's not what RJ is meant to be used for. So as those have increased exponentially, it has certainly increased our overall suspension rate. But this is an area, I think, recidivism, where you hope to see, if we provide you supports, that maybe you won't repeat, as I mentioned earlier. And there's some very telling data here to look at. So you can see ISS recidivism, OSS recidivism, and then total. And what I'll say about each of the buildings is they're a different state of development with their RJ practices. They actually have a rubric that they update on a monthly basis. I didn't include the rubric. It's very complicated to look at. Maybe I'll show it to you next month, because they're actually tracking their own progress towards the implementation to be full implementation. North has leapt very quickly to further the line. They've really taken this seriously. They all have. Principals on board, NFA Maine, Sue Valentino has really supported this work. We really have revamped the plan with them, but North has really taken this on, as has South in the past. And I just want you to pay attention to the recidivism that's at North. Do I believe it's a one-to-one? I think it's certainly a correlation that kids are learning skills, so they're not necessarily repeating. When you go from, a decrease in both ISS and OSS to the level that they did, 13% for the OSS, I think that's just a very telling data point. And overall, we see a slight decrease. And then this is something that we did for the first time when we did this survey for kids. We included the question, which was new to the survey. Have you had these restorative justice experiences? And if so, we were able to correlate if they did based on how often they did. You can see it's whether it's done weekly or daily, monthly, never, and then the average. And you can see clearly that kids who have had opportunities to do community circles, restorative circles, mediations, and reentries feel a much higher level of overall perception of school relative to those experiences around grit, social awareness, sense of belonging. You can see the different categories. Sense of belonging to me is important because that was a grudging indicator. We continue to see kids at the secondary level not feeling they have a sense of belonging. That's directly tied to their school experience. Supportive relationships is more the community experience. Kids in our community have always had a high sense of community relationships, their parents, their neighborhood, their friends, their extended family. Our kids actually report that they have a very high, maybe to their church, they have a very high relationship. The opposite is true at the school level. They did not feel they had supportive relationships. And just to show you in 1 year, how we've almost doubled, well, that's not true, because it was 49% tells you that based on the kids who have never had it. It's almost double the number of kids who report that they have a positive sense of belonging to the school. And that has gone up since we began to use the panorama survey. And I think that's it.
I have a question on this slide. What does grit mean?
Good question. So grit is your the stick-to-itiveness, do what you
Okay.
say, what you do what you say. It's perseverance. It's all, we say that it's, intelligence is oftentimes, in my opinion, very subjective. Grit is what you do with what you're given and how you fight and you stick it out and you do the extra work. And so there's a lot of research to show the importance of grit, that it oftentimes is an equalizer in the world.
Thank you. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to ask Mr. Howard if he has a question.
You want to ask them?
No, you should go ahead.
I wanted to add something about the circles because that data is really underrepresented. We have circles that are learning circles that are used almost every day at South Middle School. We have mediation circles. And then what we just did last week at North was a building-wide empathy circle. And these were facilitated by our students. They included teachers, custodians, our security monitors. The students felt so empowered. They were incredible. And I just wanted to add to that because these circles are being used in ways that are really supporting students and relationships in our buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll go fast. So you mentioned that there was different rubrics in these buildings. Are they aligned to a specific idea that we want to perpetuate throughout the district, or buildings just doing their own different things?
Good question. So just to go back, the restorative justice is supported by the Department of Justice. This was an initiative that they saw that was it breaks the school to prison pipeline. The federal government put a lot of money into RJ, and the guru is named Dr. Tom Cavanaugh. He's out of Colorado. I actually was trained by him in Long Island a few years ago. They created a rubric, and it's an implementation rubric around, does everybody speak a common language? Are students invested in the program? Are students leading? Like there's levels of it, if you implement this with fidelity, this is what it would look like. So I can introduce you to the rubric. I just thought it was too much information because I know we're always short for time to do that as well this month, but I'll certainly show it to you. And each building has a responsibility to based on the work they do as a committee, where are they any sort of those indicators? And they have to measure themselves against their own progress. And it's our way to do fidelity checks. Are you doing what you say you're doing? We're paying you as a committee. Are you actually making progress in your building? Because the committees are paid to do this work.
Mr. Howard,
Yeah,
one
one
other
more.
question.
So I'd be interested, not tonight, but if you can get it to us. So see the impact of what restorative practice is doing in our district this year and going forward. Because if I'm right, if I'm out of place, please tell me. In order for the restorative practices to work, you have to have some semblance of order. And coming out of the pandemic didn't really give us a fair shot, because coming out, it was chaos everywhere. And that was almost impossible to really implement restorative practices to be effective with those numbers. I'm curious how those numbers are going to look this year, since we're somewhat out of the pandemic, and how this work is going to look going forward. So if you just keep us abreast on those going forward as a board, I'm curious in seeing what those numbers look like.
And one last thing is, I know we're short for time. We are actually part of a national study that Dr. Tom Cavanaugh is very impressed. Mike Regan meets with him monthly and is extremely impressed by the level of the pace of progress we made here. That we're actually be part of the study, and I can show you work. It's pretty powerful. what he's concluded based on what we've seen at the RPC, the people that we talked about, they've come to our trainings because they're one of the leaders in the region right now in RJ. Schenectady took the lead a few years ago. We are also one of the districts that is being perceived as a spotlight with this work. Thank you.
So I have one question, quick. At the very beginning, you mentioned, special ed being on the list again. What are we on the list for?
So disproportionality, I mentioned before, it's the Harvey and the coal mine. We are disproportionate for suspension, for out of school based on rate visiting overall. I reported that out last month. But what that says is that's a system for all kids. They look at special ed because they know if you do it with our kids, you do it with all kids. So
remember
that's
that
what we're on the
from
list for.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this. Ms. Moriarty, you have 1 second.
And there will be 1 second. I just want to make a connection, and I think we'll talk about it more as we continue with this committee. But the sense of belonging and the social awareness, it begins there as we look into the classrooms to see what else we're doing, but they have to have that sense of belonging. And so how do we create opportunities for them to have a sense of belonging in the classroom? I wanted to make that connection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, and see you in about 5 minutes inside.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.